All right, the Special Community Development Committee meeting will come to order. Roll call, please.
Chairman Moiseo.
I'm here.
Alderman Seeger. Alderman Florian.
Here.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Present.
Alderman Turner.
Here.
Okay, approval of minutes. A, approval of minutes of September 3rd, 2019, regular Community Development Committee meeting. Motion by Alderman Turner, second by Alderman Kirkwood. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of minutes of October 7th, 2019, regular Community Development Committee meeting. Motion by Alderman Turner, second by Alderman Kirkwood. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Audience time. Does anybody want to talk about what is on the Community Development agenda? Anybody from the audience? Okay. No old business. New business. A, motion to approve zoning calendar 2590, planned development Barwell Manor. Hold on.
This one and the next one are the same.
Right, yeah. Okay, do we have a presentation? Do we?
They're here.
Oh, okay. Well, so a presentation by, okay. Here we go. This is both item A and item B. You guys got enough room there, that screen in the way, or do you need to put, just, yeah, just put them right there for now in the front row, and we'll go from there. There we go. Thank you.
Right, so I'm Adam Templer with Bear Development, Sarah Beck with Bear Development as well. We are development partners with the Waukegan Housing Authority. So Charles Chambers is here. He's the executive director from the Housing Authority. The two items on the agenda for tonight are both for the redevelopment of Barwell. It's an existing 120-unit development that's located in three quadrants. One, it's on Genesee, South Sheridan, South Genesee, South Martin Luther King, and then the last piece is a little bit south of where the Family Dollar is. Overall, the PUD is for what's laid out in front of you there. It's modifying a few of the setbacks. It's modifying a setback from a ravine. It's providing the flexibility to be able to take what's there now. It's 120 units of multifamily is going to be 96 units.
Gentlemen.
It'll be 96 units of multifamily that is new construction and 24 units that are rehab. So the buildings that you see on the posters in front of you there, whether new construction or rehab, is all going to look, new. The rehab buildings, although rehab are going to get $75,000 to $80,000 of repairs to them to make all the units, when they're complete, look very cohesive. There's one parcel that is furthest to the south. It's a non-conforming use. It's a business zoning. The reason for that change is to get it to a conforming use, to be multifamily like the rest of the parcels are. The development is it's one-for-one replacement. It's 120 units now. The bedroom mix that it is now, it's a mix of studios through 5 bedrooms. When it's complete, it's going to have the same mix. It's just going to be new units, but it's a one-for-one replacement. The development's being done as part of a RAD redevelopment through HUD and through IDA. With that redevelopment, we have the ability, or we give residents a right to return. So anybody that's at the site now, that is living at the site, that wishes to return when the redevelopment is complete, has the right to do so. During the renovation process, there will be temporary relocation for the residents. Depending on the unit, it could be anywhere from 90 days to a full year of being in a temporary unit. So when people move, it's on us to provide. We have to comply with the HUD's Uniform Relocation Act, where we pay for everybody's moving costs. We give them a safe, sanitary place to live while they are away, and it has to be of the same size that they're in now. So we try to make as little impact on the residents as we can, but there will be a bit of disruption. We're trying to do all the relocation on site so that we don't have disruptions to kids' school schedules. There are a fair amount of families that live on the site, so don't want to impact people's day-to-day lives with shuffling back and forth to school.
Any questions? Alderman Kirkwood.
In terms of those individuals that are being displaced for a temporary amount of time, so they will be able to move back into those units once they're totally completed?
So we try to minimize moves as much as we can. If we can have someone start in their unit and complete, since we have 96 new constructions, we try to do it where the new construction, a portion of them are complete and people only have to move once. That's the ideal situation. If they're in a 3-bedroom now, they go to a 3-bedroom. Some people will go to a temporary unit and then back to their original, but we try to minimize moves as much as possible.
Long overdue.
Very excited about it. You know, like
Long
I said,
overdue.
there's not been much done to these buildings for many years, so
They're
we're
cinder blocks, for crying out loud. I mean,
Yes.
how, don't get me started.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, motion, was made, did I get the motion?
We don't have a motion.
Oh, motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Turner on item A. Roll call, please.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Seager. Alderman Moiseo.
Aye, thank you. Item B, motion to approve zoning calendar 2591, map amendment rezoning, 612 South Genesee Street. Motion by Alderman Kirkwood, second by Alderman Turner. Any questions? Roll call.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Seager.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye. And item C, motion to approve zoning calendar 2593, text amendments to the City of Waukegan zoning ordinance, providing for single-room occupancy units and other affordable housing by amending Articles 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13. Motion by Alderman Turner, second by Alderman Kirkwood. Any questions on this?
I just want a point of clarification. I attended the zoning committee meeting where they discussed this, and one of the questions someone asked me, and I can't even remember who it was now, was about the Ramada, wasn't it? Noel, I messaged you that night and asked you, someone was asking if the Ramada could be turned into an SRO, and you indicated that's not a possibility.
That's correct.
Okay.
The Ramada is Zone B3, and this does not allow that use in a B3 district.
Okay, so
Nor,
hopefully,
nor does the current zoning allow a
so
single
hopefully whoever asked me is hearing this answer.
Good. All right, roll call, please.
Alderman Kirkwood.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye.
Alderman Seager.
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo.
Aye.
And may I just comment quickly? You may recall we had a moratorium related to this. That expires tomorrow naturally, but it would expire after tonight's vote, assuming there's a vote at council tonight.
Okay.
Good timing.
Yes. Item D, motion to approve zoning calendar 2594, text amendments to the City of Waukegan zoning ordinance authorizing and regulating the legal marketing of adult use recreational cannabis by amendments Articles 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13. Motion by Alderman Turner, second by Alderman Seager. Any questions on that or discussion? Alderman Turner or Florian, doesn't matter who's
Go first.
ready. Alderman Turner, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Okay, thank you. So I just have a couple really comments I want to make on this. The zoning committee meeting was really the only public hearing we had on this, and I just think we did a very poor job of letting the community know that. I've been watching this in other communities, and they've had huge, long discussions and turnout and lots of, and I don't think our community really realized that was our public forum on this issue. So I just want to put that out there, that I think that was handled poorly. I personally have a lot of mixed feelings about this. I think we need the tax revenue, obviously. But in my particular case, the only people from my ward that have contacted me are 100% against this, including the police officers that have reached out to me. So, just wanted to say that.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Alderman Turner.
thank you. So, yeah, I was at that meeting too, Alderman Florian, and I got to tell you that, so we're, up until recently, marijuana, cannabis was totally illegal, and people were going to prison for it. Then the state decided, well, it's okay if we get some revenue, some taxes off of it. So they made it legal for adults to use. And so now we're here in Waukegan at the city level, we're stipulating where and when a legal product can be used by adults. We're setting up boundaries and
Where you can- well-
No,
conditions.
not the use,
where you
just
can
the
buy it.
sale.
Conditions.
Where you can buy it.
Conditions where it can be sold, right? So that there's going to be a limitation, right?
Not used.
Yeah, limitation on where it can be sold and used, because we're going to get to that too, right? Can they smoke it in a like the building or?
The state is pretty buttoned up on what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
The state, all of this, I hate to interrupt you, all of this is governed by the state. The state has buttoned this up. All the state is asking communities, do you want to allow it to be sold in your community or not? That's it. Everything else is under the state's jurisdiction.
So how many are we going to allow?
3, the most.
There's my other point.
The ordinance that we have drafted doesn't have a specific number,
Right.
but because of the distance requirements within the state law, we don't believe it can possibly be more than 3.
Let's,
We do have a presentation if
Okay,
the
let's hear
chairman
the
would like to.
presentation.
let's do the presentation, please.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The title of the presentation is Adult Use Recreational Cannabis, It's Coming to Waukegan. Why that title, you ask yourselves? Because as you know, the first thing about this is that coming January 1st, possession, use, consumption of cannabis will be legal in Illinois.
Hold on real quick. Where is that noise coming from?
There's a church group practicing downstairs.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
way you look at it, right?
the one thing that the city cannot do is we cannot regulate or ban the possession or use of cannabis or cannabis products. The city does have limited powers under the act that the state passed, but they're mostly related to the zoning. You could, in theory, ban the sale of products inside the city, but those will be more those zoning powers that I'm talking about, and we'll get to that in a little bit. One other thing I'd like to note is that there aren't any real changes to the law that impact medical dispensaries, which are already permitted in Waukegan, or the card holders. One thing I really do want to underscore to everybody tonight is that there are a lot of state regulations on cannabis, even though we are prohibited from adding additional regulations on the actual products. You'll see that there are lots of things that any business selling cannabis or cannabis products will have to do. They have to put their name on each and every product that they sell. That way you know where the product is actually coming from. Some of the more interesting ones are things like dispensaries can only get cannabis deliveries under a very strict set of circumstances. The Illinois State Police have to issue permits for the transportation of the products. So there are a lot of regulations on that. You will also note that businesses have to have lighting, they have to have security cameras. Part of that comes from the fact that they're cash-only businesses. So it's very important that the state is doing a lot to make sure that they're highly regulated. And one of the things that I didn't realize before getting into this was just how strictly audited they are. Medical dispensaries in the state right now that are operating are often audited, every other week. So there actually are a lot of different players involved in all of this. But there are a lot of state restrictions, and they really do follow through on making sure that they're followed. So what are the types of cannabis businesses that we could potentially see under the Act, ones that we want to consider when considering an ordinance here in Waukegan? There are generally 5 that we'll talk about. The dispensary, which is the retail arm. This is what most people think about when they're talking about this. Is there going to be a place in town that's selling this? In addition to that, there are infusers. So these are the creators of the products. I put up there, think bakeries, the chocolate makers, the guys who are actually taking THC and sticking it in other products. That's an infuser license. He'll have the transporter licenses. Again, they're only allowed to transport under a very strict set of circumstances. And so they have a separate license and licensing process. Then you have the 2 types of grow operations. You've got the small grow, craft grower operations, which are the ones that are more likely to be seen in somewhere like Waukegan, as opposed to the large grow cultivation centers, which are generally concentrated downstate. All of these are regulated at the state level. All of them require a state license. There are very few of those licenses available In talking about dispensaries, there's only 50 in the first round, 74 in the second round. There's a very few of these licenses for this region. I did put an asterisk down there to talk about on-site consumption. That is a separate process. It is not strictly regulated by a license by the state. And one of the reasons that we are not recommending including on-site consumption in our ordinance. Part of that relates to the issues that we foresee related to things coming from this Cannabis Act. Namely, the second one on this, when talking about on-site consumption, is that there is no equivalent of dram shop insurance for a facility that's allowing people to use recreational cannabis. So if somebody's injured, there really isn't insurance that they can get to protect the business. And so therefore we are concerned that jumping off into the deep end on this and encouraging or allowing these types of businesses in Waukegan at this very early date might not be appropriate. Rather wait for the federal laws to catch up, allowing the changes to the banking and insurance laws in order to get some of those concerns addressed. As I said before, this is a cash-only business because of the federal banking laws. So again, you have to consider that as a factor when talking about zoning in particular, based on the expectations of, traffic, making sure that they're armored cars, the rest of it, that they've got businesses that are going to be able to handle that. I put up there some of the other things that we anticipate being issues for the city, including the increase in time expected to deal with police processing, especially in related to DUIs. The fact that there aren't good tests right now, as I'm sure you've all heard now, which costs us more money when we have to hire more drug recognition experts. Some of the other costs that are buried in this are expungements. We foresee this being a fairly expensive process because of the automatic expungements, both in this act, and I've lumped it together with the juvenile expungements, automatic expungements, to come up with that figure. But there will be other costs to the city as well. Expect some changes to HR policy. I mean, there's a lot buried in this. So as I alluded to during the last committee meeting, I wanted to just touch on the taxation issues. Under the state law, the state will be collecting a 7% sales tax on all of these products. In addition to that, there will be a state excise tax on each of the products based on the type of product and the amount of THC in it. That tax varies from 10 to 25%. And then in addition to that, the city can impose up to a 3% municipal sales tax on those products as well. So it's close to 20 to 35%. So it's actually a fairly substantial number. So we put an example. Again, I'm spitballing numbers here. These aren't official numbers, but theoretically, for $1 million in sales, the city could see $30,000 in sales tax being collected on that, of which IDOR charges you a percentage, so the number's actually going to be a little less. State sales tax of $70,000 on that $1 million worth of sales, and then a state excise tax on top of that, $100,000, of another $100,000 to $250,000, depending on the type of product. There are some things in this legislation that might help offset some of these costs. In theory, there's a distributive fund, 8% of their sales tax, although as has been noted to me, it's structured as a waterfall, so that pot of money may never actually materialize and would be distributed across the state on a per capita basis. In addition, there's also some grants available to help offset some of the law enforcement costs, but those grants have to be separately allocated by the states and appropriated by the state. So what can we do? Well, we've got a couple of different options. We can ban the sale of ban any of these individual types of license within the city, or we can allow them to operate with restrictions. Again, noting that you could have a home rule sales tax of up to 3% on the sale. The one thing that I want to really stress to everybody tonight is based on the language in the current Waukegan zoning ordinance, taking no action tonight is not an option that's on the table for you. If we get to January 1 and we do not have an ordinance either banning these types of licenses or permitting them under a set of circumstances, our zoning code has a number of similar types of businesses already within it that could allow a legal theory to be advanced that would allow those types of businesses in Waukegan. So I would highly recommend to you to consider taking some action over the course of the next month or 2 months with regard to either banning the sales outright or allowing these businesses with the restrictions that we put in place. I also note here that the state law requires 1,500 feet between dispensaries, and then also includes 1,000-foot buffers for signs and advertising, which effectively creates a buffer from schools, daycares, parks, libraries, and other recreational facilities. The state law does give us some power to create buffers from other sensitive areas, and that's something we'll talk about here in a minute. Noel, did you want to talk about our ordinance?
Sure. Thank you for advancing the slide. So the way we've drafted this ordinance, any of the uses that we would include would require a conditional use permit. And that would go through our standard conditional use permit process with the application, the review and consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission. From then it would come to this committee and then on to City Council. Again, the Planning and Zoning Commission makes a non-binding recommendation, not an actual action. So we estimate, based on the distances that Douglas spoke of that are within the state law, that there could be up to 2 freestanding dispensaries, one downtown and one in Fountain Square. Depending on exactly where they located, there might be a possibility that a third could locate, a second one at Fountain Square, a third in total, but it's less likely that would happen. Any of the other uses that we included, which are all of the uses other than the consumption location. So the cultivations, the large grow, the craft grow, which is the small one, the transportation, and the infuser, those would all be permitted as conditional uses only in the I-1 and I-2 industrial districts. The dispensary would be permitted, again, as a conditional use only in the B4 and B5 districts, which are downtown, and the Fountain Square overlay area. So those would be the only locations that we've written into this ordinance that those could go. The one exception is that a dispensary could co-locate with one of the other uses in the I-1 or I-2 district. So for example, if there were a craft grower or an infuser that wanted to have a dispensary for their products co-located with their other site, they could apply for that in their conditional use application to have their infuser and dispensary in the same location in I-1 or I-2. Again, as part of the conditional use permit process.
I believe it's only in the I-2 district, not the I-1 district.
Oh, you're right. Thank you for the correction. I apologize. It's the I-2 district. That's not in I-1. Thank you, Douglas. Again, this ordinance would not allow on-site consumption. That's the use that we're leaving out. It doesn't affect what's governed in the state law, people being able to use in their own homes. That's not part of zoning. So one of the things that came up at the Planning and Zoning Commission, the state law doesn't include houses of worship in the buffers. And that was a question that the commissioners asked, and there was a bunch of discussion around that. We do have some specific things called out in the ordinance related to considerations for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council to make during that conditional use permit process. And we felt, after lengthy discussion about it, that houses of worship question already fits under those considerations. And they're enumerated here for you. The lower set of second indented bullet points there. The CUP process requires notifying houses of worship along with other property owners within 250 feet and can object. So that's a requirement for any conditional use permit. We send a certified letter to all the property owners within 250 feet of the location of the conditional use. or the proposed conditional use, where they have an opportunity to support or object directly. And those support and objection letters become part of the official record of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They obviously that way are also notified when the hearing is, and they can attend the hearing and testify in person also. Also, the conditional use permit, as you know, requires city council approval. So in addition to Planning and Zoning Commission, it would come here before you to weigh those issues and consider them. The CUP language also looks at the impact of existing facilities in any area, existing uses on a new facility, and that can be weighed. So you have the ability to weigh that impact regardless of having it. Another concern for us is that we don't have an official registry of churches or houses of worship in our community. So, there's a chance if we put in a buffer that we could miss one because we don't have a registry and we don't know about it. So the most effective tool, actually, in my opinion, is that notification to the property owners within 250 feet. So also, we already have regulations regarding medical dispensaries, and those have been in our zoning ordinance since that state legislation was approved. That would not change under this. Those would remain the same. And as you're aware, from the Finance Committee, there was an ordinance presented to you for the 3% taxation that's allowed. So,
Can I ask a quick question on that?
yes.
Yeah.
So that 3% taxation is only on recreational use, not medical use, am I correct?
That is correct.
Right, you can't tax medicine.
None of the taxation numbers that I gave you impact medical use. That's all regulated under the Compassionate Cannabis Act.
Recreation, not the...
So we're asking you to consider now, Douglas already mentioned that we need to act in one way or another before the end of the calendar year. So we either need to act to create zoning regulations to govern this or to ban it, whichever you're comfortable with. And as you know, we've drafted the ordinance regulating the zoning in case that's the option that you choose. There are a limited number of licenses available and a rolling application process for those licenses. And so developers who are interested in pursuing those licenses are already looking for locations. People have been reaching out to us for close to a year now, since before it was approved by the state. And we have spoken with a number of groups who are interested in Waukegan locations for various uses, various licenses. So we've drafted this ordinance that we've presented to you that we think best addresses the concerns. As Douglas pointed out early on, those issues, those police issues, those are here whether we allow sales or not. Those will be in our community because there will be people that purchase in other communities and drive through our community. There will be people that purchase elsewhere and come here and use in their homes in Waukegan. So those factors are here regardless of what we choose to do, which is why we drafted the ordinance that we did. After the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing on October 10th, Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of the ordinance for you.
I think Winthrop Harbor just approved it.
Yes,
North Chicago,
I believe they're in the process of approving it.
process. Gurney, in the process.
I'm not sure on Gurney.
It's gonna be around you.
Zion has.
So you might as well do it and get some scratch out of it.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you might as well. I mean, and it's so heavily regulated by the state, we don't have to do a thing but collects the sales tax from it, and that's about it. It's pretty simple. Yes, Alderman Turner.
Yeah, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know if it was Douglas or Noel that mentioned the mandatory expungement. I thought I heard that there was some cost associated to the city. Can you talk about that?
There are some mandatory expungements both under this act and then also the Juvenile Court Act. It was amended last year that require us to take small cannabis possession charges and expunge them from our records going back, if not decades, to the beginning of time.
Hold on, Douglas. That's got nothing to do with zoning right now. Let's wait on that,
Well,
you know?
I think that it is relevant, due respect, Chairman, because I think that to the Alderman's point, it does in fact have some costs to the city related to ensuring that we provide notices, both published in the newspaper and then also certified mail to the folks whose records are being automatically expunged.
And that's what I was curious about, thank you. And then the other thing, and that's what I was this is what I was kind of alluding to when I spoke earlier, was the on-site consumption and the DUI and insurance issue. And so if we allow marijuana to be sold, but they can't consume it on site because there's no dram insurance. At first, I don't think it's the city's responsibility to ensure that a business has insurance. I mean, that's between the consumer and the business. And then you mentioned DUI, but there's no legal definition of what's under the influence of marijuana. There is no measurement.
No.
So,
That's exactly correct.
yeah, so how do we say we're going to stop you from driving under the influence when we can't tell you what under the influence is? One moment, please, let me finish. And then the other thing is, let's say some person goes to a dispensary and they buy marijuana, but they can't smoke it over there, right? What do you think they're going to do? You smoke it in their car or go to the park or wherever else they go. I mean, so you're not going to stop them from smoking, and you'll probably end up having more people at risk of being involved in some kind of accident, in that they're, loading their pipe or rolling joints while they're driving and distracted in that regard, much less so from having used this legal product. That's my thought on it. But go ahead.
I do want to correct one thing that I may have misspoke on, which is there is in fact levels in the act that would qualify for driving under the influence. There isn't appropriate testing, though, in
Right.
place in order to accurately measure somebody's.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Kirkwood?
Aye.
Alderman Turner?
Aye.
Alderman Florian?
No.
Alderman Seeger?
Aye.
Alderman Moiseo?
Aye. Right. That is it. Motion by Alderman Turner, second by Alderman Kirkland to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're
Aye.
adjourned.